Hello, welcome to Ael Y Bryn this windy morning. I've been here for about 18 months now, and so I thought I'd show you some of the things that I've done since I moved here in March 2021. I'm setting up a little homestead here on just under half an acre, and the half an acre also includes the footprint for the house, sheds, the gravelly area where we park, that kind of thing. It's not all growing space. When I moved here 18 months ago, where I'm standing now was almost entirely weedy lawn, except for a little bit at the back where the previous people had had a small vegetable garden, which was surrounded by stones. So my son moved the stones, and on March the 31st, we made the first bed, which is the one here. And then the second bed, the one here, on April the 4th. And gradually over that summer, in between other work I was doing and other jobs such as unpacking my house, which we still haven't finished, by the way, it's crazy how many boxes there still are, I made 4 beds. And in the winter, the 5th bed, there's still a little bit of grass which is going to be finished off this winter time. It just didn't get done this year because, you know, life, have to do other stuff. So this is what we call the back garden, because it is our back garden, and I am absolutely thrilled with everything that we've produced here. It's been amazingly productive. All of the beds in the back garden were made in the same way. The lawn cut on a low level. I used a strimmer because at the time I didn't have a lawnmower, and then I covered the area where the bed is going to be and the paths with cardboard overlapped so that there weren't any gaps. This we then watered. It helps to stick it to the ground. The cardboard is a light excluding mulch. It helps to kill the grass and other weeds underneath. And on top of that, I added 5 centimetres of peat-free compost to each of the beds. That's 5 centimetres after it's been tamped down doing the no-dig dance, which is just a way of firming the compost on the ground. And that is then absolutely fine for sowing and planting right away. When I made this bed here, I didn't do that right away because I'd literally just moved house and I didn't have any plants. But as soon as there were plants, in they went, and so on throughout all the beds here. The cardboard breaks down and the roots of the plants can go through the cardboard into the soil beneath. And so I was also able to sow carrots and parsnips here into these new beds. It is important though that the cardboard is moist. If it's really dry, then the roots go down and kind of hit the cardboard and they can grow along. So if you live in a really dry area, do keep an eye on that if you're making beds in this way. The main weeds here are things like creeping buttercup and creeping thistle. I don't have bindweed and couch, hooray, but I did have bindweed and couch in my previous garden, and this method works perfectly fine for those too. Any weeds that pop through are troweled out and chucked in the compost heap. I found here that the beds really hardly needed any weeding at all. Very little grass came through. The main weeds are the ones I'll be dealing with actually this week, which are things blowing on such as rosebay, willow herb and thistle. In here you can see there's quite a lot of weeds that have germinated, so I'll be hand weeding these out. I've been working away quite a bit, and the weeds have taken advantage of that fact. For the paths I used wood chip mostly, or sawdust from trees that I'd had cut down in the orchard, and this is mostly rotted down, so I'm going to add a little sprinkling of extra wood chip this winter time. The wood chip's great, it rots down and feeds the soil beneath. I like narrow paths. These are about 30 centimetres, 12 inches wide. You can have paths whatever width you like, and the beds are roughly 4 feet wide, 1.2 metres, except the one over there, which is just a really big bed. Since making these beds in the spring and summer last year, I've not topped them up at all with any compost, and they've been pretty much cropping most of the time ever since. This Florence fennel bolted. It didn't really like the dry weather this year, but I'm letting it grow because it looks amazing, and the pollen it produces is absolutely delicious, sweet and aniseedy, great for insects to forage on as well. And also I'll get seeds that I can use in cooking, and you can use the fronds as a herb in cooking too. There's a lot of flowers and vegetables. It's really abundant here in the garden. Now this one here that looks a bit scraggy, that actually was planted last summer, and I've been picking greens off it ever since. Once upon a time it was a white sprouting broccoli. I'm not entirely sure what it thinks it is now, but it's been hugely productive, and I'm hoping it's going to go to flower soon too. I plan to add a little compost to the beds this winter as there's space, and it will be about 1/2 inch, a centimetre on top of the beds. Some of the vegetables here will be in the ground all winter and through the spring and cropped as needed, such as brassicas, leeks and parsnips. These are my radicchio. I have a passion for radicchio. They are so delicious. And other things such as these beans are going to be dried and used in the winter in soups and stews. Here in the greenhouse I've got various plants which are going to go in the polytunnel and also outside. There are some potatoes in sacks for winter cropping, and I've been sorting out the garlic ready to plant that out too. The top bit of the orchard here is family space mainly. I've promised my children I won't grow anything on this grass so that we can have barbecues and you can put tents up, and there's hammocks that go from these trees. At the moment we're really busy sorting out these sticks. My son Theo is cutting them up so that the bigger bits are going to be used as kindle in the wood burner, and the smaller bits are going to go in the hedges to make little dead hedges for the wild things to live in. At the top of the orchard we have these magnificent oaks. They are absolutely a joy. I love them. So many creatures live in them. At the moment they are completely pelting us with lots and lots of acorns. This is the orchard, and here I've been making beds sort of gradually, a little bit at a time, as I've had resources to make them and also the time to do this. And as you can see, all of these beds are being made between existing apple trees. When I moved here, this area was again almost entirely grass, except for the established fruit trees and some fruit bushes. And I've been making it more and more and more of a productive food garden ever since. This is a food forest or a forest garden, but unlike forest gardens where most of the plants are perennials, I mix up perennials and annuals to add more diversity to what we eat. The ambition here on my homestead is to try to produce about 80% of the food that we consume. I'm nowhere near that at the moment, and obviously I don't mean things like bananas or coffee, but I'm working towards it, and it's a fun ambition to have. Be interesting to see if I can do it and how long it would take me to reach it. Here I'm growing an awful lot of food underneath trees because this is the environment that I'm having to work with, and for sure anything really close to the base of the apple trees in the summer hasn't been as productive as things grown more centrally, but they do all get plenty of light because of course the sun moves across the sky, and so although there's some shade, they do get sunshine too. And this summer, when it's been really warm and sunny, this area has benefited hugely from the cooling shade of these apple trees. At the moment, we're busy picking them. My son Theo is home now from university, and he's ever so handy for apple picking because he's 6'3" and a bit, so he can just reach up and get them, and he's been going up the ladder for the really high ones. Last year, I mostly made sort of this half of the orchard area. This bit here has asparagus in, and as you can see, it's been windy here and quite a few things have blown over. This area is predominantly perennials, perennial kale, perennial alliums, different kinds of herbs, and it's also where a hedgehog comes every night foraging. We spot it on our trail camera. So last year, this area was about half the size, and the extra beds have been made gradually, small bit at a time, as I've had the time and the compost to do so. All of the new additions here were made literally as the plants were waiting to go in, including here, which was the potato bed, and I was like making it while the potatoes are sitting beside me wanting to go in. The oca and yacon here went into a bed made with cardboard and about 1 centimetre of compost, less than half an inch, and I cut a hole through the cardboard into the soil beneath, and they've done really, really well. Not a lot has come through, though recently I've noticed some grass, so I'll be hand weeding that out. This is the asparagus bed, which features in another one of my videos that I made this spring, and I've added to it Phacelia green manure, which makes these beautiful purple flowers. And the green manure is perfectly fine with the asparagus, and it helps to add biodiversity to the soil beneath. Another bed made this year as it was needed. This originally had potatoes in, and I used some compost that I found in a big pile here in the garden to make the bed. It's now got kind of anything that's spare and some radishes in. I'm going to be filling it up with winter harvesting salads and brassicas. And here is brassica cage, which I absolutely love. It is a full height one. I grew some of the brassicas under cover to protect them from butterflies this year, and others like these, they were just planted out in the open, and this is because I'm increasing the biodiversity here. Without the caterpillars, I won't get the beneficial predators, so I need to have both. I protected some though because I didn't want everything munched away. These are making a comeback. They'll just be a bit smaller than the ones that were grown under cover and didn't get nibbled. This is the fruit cage, which is enormous, and my son Rory has been covering it with this metal mesh to protect it against squirrels and magpies and jays, which would easily get through normal netting. As you can see, it's very much a work in progress. Sadly, due to safety reasons, I had to have 7 trees cut down when we moved here, and this summer Rory has been chopping up the logs. This will be fantastic for our wood burner this year. The log store was made with a sloping tarpaulin roof, which collects water into these water butts. This pond is a fantastic addition to the garden. It's been brilliant seeing how it's developed and the wildlife that are using it. Allow a lot of weeds behind so that there's wildlife corridors for them. But this thistle is going to go. We don't need that there. There's a bazillion thistles in the field next door. The Polytunnel was put up in August 2021. I had it put up by the team from First Tunnels. There is no way I could have done this myself. and it has been a marvellous source of joy. So it went up too late for summer crops last year, so it was then planted out with things for the autumn, winter and spring, and now I'm gradually clearing the summer crops as they come to an end and planting it up with things for the winter and next spring. Many of the plants that I'm putting in now will be cropping right through to May, when I'll be clearing them to add next year's summery crops. It's been an exciting discovery comparing how things are growing here in Wales with how they grew in Somerset, where I had a polytunnel for 10 years or so, in the garden where I lived for 20 years. One of the things I was concerned about were the trees in the orchard, that maybe they'd overshadow it too much. But as it's turned out this year, with it being so hot, got crazy temperatures in here, the shade from those trees really helped keep this from turning into a furnace. And comparing how my tomatoes and aubergines reacted with friends who have polytunnels in a more open site, it really did seem to help. So hurrah, actually something I was worried about turned out to be a great benefit. Another fascinating discovery is this is on a slope. It's going down with the slope, and my hill, well, it's not my personal hill, the hill I live on, goes up, up, up to the top, as hills do. And right at the top of this hill, it takes me about half an hour to reach that. It's pretty steep. You can see 3 different mountain ranges, so it's very undulating here. As the rain falls, which it's pretty good at doing here in Wales, it's watering the polytunnel from underneath. So it's made a huge difference. I haven't needed to water the polytunnel as much as I had to in Somerset, and recent heavy rains, I've noticed even in a dry area, the side here for some reason was a lot drier than the rest of the polytunnel. That's now been beautifully irrigated by some heavy rains that we've had recently. So that's exciting. It means that although I do water things in and keep an eye on them, it's saving me water and also a lot of time. The top part of the polytunnel, the first 10 feet, 2.5 metres, is wood chip with a narrow composty border for growing things in. And this is so that I have an area to make things and also just sit and have a cup of tea. I may make this into a compost area later, but at the moment I'm really enjoying having this space. And the edges are full of wonderful things. This is lemon grass. I made the polytunnel using cardboard and compost, though when it first went up I covered the whole thing with every spare sheet of polythene that I had, some of which, you know, I've had for about 15 years, and that was to stop the grass regrowing while I had the time to lay the cardboard and the compost. Whilst the polytunnel was being made, I'd recently had a pretty bad leg injury, so I'm kind of doing it all in bits at the time, on one leg mostly, but it got done. And since then I haven't added any more compost. The plan is to add a little next spring, sort of May time. So in between all these tomatoes, I'm gradually planting out the next lot of crops. Melons, cucumbers, tomatoes, tomatillo are still cropping here, as are the sweet potatoes, which are not ready to pick yet. I was advised by people who've been running small holdings in Wales for years to do some asparagus undercover, and so here is my undercover asparagus bed. That will be ready to crop in another 2 years. The plants at the back that are very tall are Mexican marigolds. Not all of the beds have been made with compost. I'm experimenting with sheep stags. Be interesting to see how this breaks down over the winter. This was made using a sheet of old polythene that went down for a few months. That killed the grass, and then I added bits of compost from pots that had finished. Hasn't been planted yet. It's going to have either garlic or broad beans, haven't decided. I've used wood chip for perennials such as fruit trees and fruit bushes, as well as making paths with it. Trying out sheep's fleece, which is used as packaging. It's used to keep things cool, to clear ground too. At the moment I'm using it just to keep some pots on. This is a hugolette which we made last year, and the rhubarb has loved it. I'm using many different kinds of green manures, such as this mustard, to add diversity and also to reduce compost use. Other mulches include comfrey and grass clippings, ideal on things that aren't really tender. I wouldn't put them around lettuces, for example, unless it was really hot weather, because it can make things a little sluggy. I am having a great time setting up this garden. It really is wonderful. Doing it in bits around the rest of the work that I do, and it's a constant source of adventure, really. One thing I'm often asked is how many people are working here, and except for the odd thing that my kids do to help out, such as chopping firewood or building the fruit cage, I put the brassica cage up myself. It's all me. There's no there's no team of gardeners here, hiding here. I had a very strange comment on one of my YouTube videos the other day, which was implying that the work was being done by my ex-partner, who has never even been here. But, you know, it is me who's doing this, which is why it's just being done in little bits. And it's fantastic. I'm absolutely loving it and look forward to the next 18 months here.